All right. Welcome, folks. Thank you for joining us in the Vermont Wild Kitchen. We are very excited to have with us Jessee Lawyer, who is a Missisquoi Abenaki chef. He is the executive chef at Sweetwater's in Burlington, and we are excited to have him for our quarterly episode of the Vermont Wild Kitchen Presents, the Dawnland Kitchen. So today, folks, as we always are, we're here to bring you into our kitchens. We're here to talk about wild food and Vermont farm fresh food. And we are inviting you all to not only click share on this live video, but also for you to ask your questions, bring your stories into the chat, drop some knowledge that you have. And with that being said, without further ado, I'm going to bring on Jessee Lawyer, and he's going to tell us what he's going to be cooking today. So thank you for tuning in, and we look forward to this wonderful episode.
Thank you, everybody, for joining in. Today, we're going to be doing walleye cheeks, seared in bear fat, with a hominy, wild rice, and bean salad, and then a little change to the menu. When I was at Hannaford's grabbing a cucumber, I saw ground cherries, which are
you can't beat.
So I decided to do a little ground cherry salsa on top just to give it a little extra zazz.
You found those at Hannaford's, you said?
Found those at Hannaford's. They're called golden berries at Hannaford's, but they're the same thing without the husks, but a little less sweet than the ones we have here, but they still work pretty well.
Wonderful.
So originally I wanted to break down a whole walleye, show the process, show removing the cheeks, what's called the wings on the breast with where would be the breast. I'm not sure what the anatomy of a fish is, and the fins, but we were gracious enough. Nicole can tell you who donated the fish for tonight. I wasn't able to get any myself, but yeah, we're going to start cooking, and we're going to start cooking with the salad. More assembling than anything. So I start with a cucumber. I did a lot of the prep at work today, cooking the beans, the rice, and the hominy just to cut down on time. When I get to those, I will show you, or rather walk you through the cooking process. Right now, I'm just medium dicing some cucumbers, put in the salad.
The cucumbers are about to be popping up too on Vermont farms. I know there's such an abundance of wonderful food coming up all around us right now. It's pretty fun to be in Vermont during this time.
When I was on vacation, I got a bunch of emails and text messages that the local farms I work with, they have their produce coming up, and started to get excited to get home.
Yeah. Well, and tell us, where were you on vacation? We were talking a little bit earlier.
So I went to Alaska with a group of indigenous chefs on a team building trip. We flew into Anchorage, hung around there for a couple days, went down to Homer, did some halibut fishing. I myself didn't catch any halibut. Everyone else on the trip, I did catch 2 large cod, so my nickname was the Cod Slayer by the end of the trip.
There we go.
From there, we spent a couple days in Talkeetna. We went rainbow trout fishing on the Talkeetna River. I caught I think it was like an 18-inch rainbow and then a 14-inch grayling. We couldn't keep the rainbows, but we were able to keep the grayling and cook that up that night. Then we drove up to Denali National Forest and then back to Anchorage, and the chef who put the trip together, Chef Elena Terry with Wild Berries Kitchen, we did a final meal at the end of it, and it was just amazing.
I'll tell you, I followed along on Instagram, Jessee, and it was not only mouthwatering, but the views were stunning of the photos that you were posting. And I just dropped Jesse's Instagram handle in the chat too. So if you all are on Instagram, I would definitely suggest following him, and a lot of his food adventures are posted there as well. So what was your favorite part of the trip?
Getting to eat some of the coastal native foods, muktuk, seal, caribou, fermented whale meat. Had something called Eskimo ice cream, which was whipped caribou fat with lingonberries, I think they were, and that was probably my favorite. Was eating that. Just switch gears a little bit. So I have onions and cucumbers in here right now, and I cooked some true Vermont cranberry beans earlier. So what I do with these is I bring them to just boiling, and then I turn it down to a simmer, just so it's kind of like flipping, and I just watch them until they're tender, pull them, shock them in water, and go from there. I'm going to add some wild rice. This is just store-bought. This isn't indigenous harvested. I would prefer to buy indigenous harvested wild rice, but this is what I had handy for me. So this, I just cook it like pasta, big pot of water, bring it to a boil. When it's boiling, I then turn it down. It's not exactly like pasta. And just until it's tender, add some of that in.
About how much time are you cooking the beans for and then the rice for?
The beans went for about an hour and a half today. It depends on the variety and the situation. The wild rice is about 30 to 40 minutes. This got overcooked. It doesn't ruin it. It just makes it pop and is a little chewier. That usually takes about 40 minutes. And then I'm going to add some of my favorite hominy, Corn Mafia hominy. If anybody was watching last time, I made the grits. Those are corn. And these were just cooked just like the beans. And it took about half hour to do that. So it's super simple, super clean, just focusing on the flavors of what I'm putting in here. I am going to enhance it a little bit with some olive oil, some maple vinegar, and some salt. Always taste. More vinegar. The salt's good. And then I'm going to set that aside. So next we're going to work on the salsa or the relish. I'm just going to start out by halving these ground cherries.
And for folks who maybe haven't had ground cherries before, how would you describe them, Jesse?
Cross between a tomato and a pineapple. They've got that acid.
Tomato and a pineapple.
Yeah, I don't know, they're really hard to describe. And the first time I had one, that's how it was described to me. And I don't even know if that gives it justice. It's just a unique flavor.
Hey, and they're wonderful snacks. I think that's one of my favorite parts about the ground cherries is when someone like brings a bag of them to a cookout or something, you could just sit there and snack on them.
Yeah.
For hours, seemingly. But they do have that. They have that pop of a tomato, and then they have that just sweetness. It's kind of like a little treat.
Mm-hmm. And it's fun too. They're kind of like peanuts, where if they come in the husk, you get to peel them out or peel the husk off and pop them that way.
Yeah, yeah. Do you often cook with the ground cherries, or is this something special?
I do cook quite a bit. Whenever I do find them in the store or at the farmer's market, or they're given to me from various tribal members. I was actually just given 3 ground cherry plants, so those are going in the ground in the next couple of days, so I'll have my own supply.
That's awesome. And I know there's a ton of farmers around that are growing them, and you can generally find them around at farmers markets and other places around Vermont within, that local food system.
They're so
that
good.
is so pervasive here.
So now I'm just going to do a little serrano pepper. It's going to take the seeds out. Actually, 2 of them.
And we have a question. Do the ground cherries have pits?
They have little seeds. They don't have pits. And the seeds are...
Yeah, you're not going to be breaking your teeth or anything.
No, not at all. They're called ground cherries, husk cherries, golden berries, Cape gooseberries. There's all sorts of names for them. I think Cape gooseberries, that name came from when they were brought to Africa and started to be a cultivar over there. But they are an American or an indigenous to the Americans cultivar and wild foods. I've heard of them growing wild.
That's kind of what
I haven't found any though.
I haven't found any either. And kind of that's what we were talking about a little bit earlier, right, Jesse? Like, what does a local food system actually mean here in Vermont? But also what you experienced in Alaska and how indigenous food, really has a huge part to play and is oftentimes either purposely buried or has been ignored or tried to be stomped out. And I guess what are you thinking? What do you think about seeing more of these indigenous crops kind of becoming more mainstream and into people's diets?
Well, I would start off by saying you can't have a conversation about local foods, local food systems, eating local without talking about indigenous foods. These are the foods that sustained our ancestors over, thousands of years, hundreds of years, depending on when the original crops came up or were gathered. But you just can't have that conversation without talking about indigenous foods. Is corn, is that the #1 crop grown in the world, or is #2 something like that?
Yeah.
That alone right there, corn was nowhere else in the world prior to colonization, before European contact here. That is a truly indigenous food to the Americas. Same thing with squash, beans. I think the only beans that were outside of these continents were soybeans and garbanzo beans. I'm going to plug another native chef real quick here. His name is Chef Nephi Craig. He goes into this a lot with his cooking show where, major food systems in the world, you think of Italian cuisine and, it's very tomato heavy, or in Asian cooking where heat is brought a lot into the cooking. Those were cultivars of the Americas. They didn't have those prior to contact, and through trade, they gather them. So a lot of food systems worldwide, I'd probably say most of them, are directly influenced from our original crops. And when I say our original crops, I'm not talking Abenaki crops. I'm talking about the indigenous community as a whole. So
yeah, and it's pretty amazing, right? You go to different places all around the world with all the different types of indigenous foods, and how we were mentioning how there are so many foods that are grounded in place and part of that place, but like the one defining factor among this as well, those are important. It's also that food does connect everything, right? And we were kind of talking about that a little bit, about how all of these foodways end up connecting us as people as well, even if they are different.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I look back at my childhood to today, you know, some of my fondest memories are centered around food, you know, our family gathering at the table and sharing in a meal, you know, no matter what it was. But it was through food that, you know, brought us together as a family or friends or community. And that's, I guess, my main goal with doing what I'm doing is reinstilling, maybe not reinstilling, but rather reinforcing the sense of community and what food does for us as a whole, more, you know, and not just for sustenance, but, you know, I'm not sure if anybody's heard food is medicine. It truly is. And cooking these foods is healing, you know?
Yeah, definitely. And I think too, when we're talking about wild food, right? So many folks are getting into it because it's that connection back to the land and nature and everything that we, you know, and love here in Vermont. But like you said, you can't have a conversation about this without talking about indigenous foodways and how that's being represented. We can't think about what's on our plate or on our table every night without thinking about where it came from and where those origins are and what has transpired since then to get us to the point that we are now.
Exactly. And I mean, too, with myself, I'm just rediscovering a lot of, or rather not rediscovering, learning about some of these flavors, because these were lost in my family, like beyond wild game. And, you know, like a butternut squash, you know, I didn't know shit about indigenous foods or indigenous foodways or my own foodways. And so it's just about reconnecting myself and my family to our original diet. And I mean,
yeah, and making sure that knowledge is accessible too.
Exactly. And I mean, a large part of my blood is also French, so don't get me wrong, I love pea soup and ham, but
I think that's one of the beautiful parts about it, right? Is that food can be so universal as well, as long as we keep in mind, you know, where it came from, you know, how we're growing it, how we're eating it, and that connection that it fosters. That's one of the beauties of it, and making sure that everybody's represented, right? Making sure everyone has access to be outside, to hunt and fish and grow their own food as well if they so choose. And unfortunately, that's not where we are right now, but hopefully we can keep all working to get to that place.
Yeah, I think that everyone, and whether this is attainable for everyone, but should have a hand at least, or the knowledge of where their food comes from. You know, I put a questionnaire on my stories on Instagram one time about whether or not people hunted, and then if they did hunt, did they butcher their own animal? You know, same thing with fish, and, you know, do they grow their own crops? Do you forage wild goods? And a lot of people didn't. And then I asked at the end, why? And the majority of the common answers were lack of knowledge and lack of accessibility.
Yeah.
So it's about, I mean, for those that don't have the knowledge or the accessibility to have their hands in what they're eating, it's about helping them to get to that point.
Yeah. And I think, you know, it's a great thing to remember for those who have been doing this for years. You got to spread the knowledge. You got to share it. Otherwise, these type of traditions aren't going to be able to live on, and you got to keep growing and learning with it as well, or else, you know, we're going to be stuck in our old ways. So this is really a wonderful reminder. So what are you doing with the salsa there?
Just hand chopping it as fine as I can. I
kind of love that technique. I've never seen somebody hand chop salsa. It's usually like in a blender. Do you find the melding of the flavors a little bit better?
I'd like to think so, whether or not that's true, you know, but I'd like to think it's a little tastier when it's made by hand.
At the very least, there's like the essence of the loving chopping being imparted into the food.
Yeah, and there's no chance of over chopping if you forget that you have your mixer on. So
that is also very true.
Your food processor. All right, so that's right about where I want it.
You got someone who agrees with you that it tastes better when chopped by hand as well.
Yep, exactly. And I chopped everything together versus separate, because that just really incorporates and reinforces those flavors as a whole. Versus if I chopped all of the onions first and all of the ground cherries first, cilantro, etc., it just brings all those flavors together. I'm just gonna do a little squeeze of lime in my hand, just make sure there's.
And you have in there, you have ground cherries, cilantro, onions. What else did you throw in there? The serrano peppers.
Yep. And I'm just gonna hit it with a little bit of salt. Maybe some peppers.
One of my favorite parts about the garden salsas too that get made this time of the year is the longer they sit in the fridge and the more they meld together, just the better they get. And there's just such a wonderful array of vegetables available out there, whether you're trading with a neighbor or buying it from your country store or what have you. Always a good, fun activity to make some salsa at home. And easy.
And super easy. And you can do it by hand if you don't have equipment.
Yes, a big point around just the accessibility of it. Mm-hmm. I know I started fermenting salsa a couple of years ago, and I will swear by it. But you ferment it in the tomato juices with for like a day or two, and it adds this like bubbly, effervescent type of wonderful flavor to the salsa that I just can't get enough of.
Yeah, I started last year doing fermenting hot sauces, and
yeah,
to be honest, sriracha can go to hell after some hand fermented or some homemade fermented hot sauce.
I completely agree with you, and I think I have like the 15 bottles in my fridge that I fermented to prove it as well.
I know. I thought I was making a lot until it didn't last that long.
I overcompensated because I had that happen. So now I have more hot sauce than I think I know what to do with. But we're slowly getting through it.
Makes a great trade item too.
Yes, it does. And I will say again, I've been plugging that all these wonderful vegetables are popping up in farm stands and across Vermont, but wild edibles are starting to really flourish too. So if you all are interested in learning more about that, I would check out some. Vermont Foragers is a great place, and a lot of the field guides have a lot of wonderful information in it as well.
And I'm sure too, everyone knows somebody that knows something in the wild and is more than willing to teach. I know some foragers or wild crafters, they like to hide their spots, but there's people out there that are more than willing to share the knowledge. I know I am with a little bit of knowledge that I've learned. I'm more than willing to teach people and bring them along on my journey, because I think it's important that, like I said before, people have a hand in their food systems, and but at the same time, with gathering anything wild, whether it's game or plants, not over harvesting, knowing just taking what you need. And I personally have a big problem with people selling them. I mean, that's just my personal preference. Like, I won't buy them at the restaurant. I think that just leads to over harvesting. I'd rather gather what I can for myself and my family, maybe some friends, and leave the rest to be enjoyed by others, and then to keep going. Because I mean, ramps have a fairly long mature process, right?
7 years. Yeah, 7 years. And that's a really great point about sustainability and making sure you're doing it right and thinking about what you're buying off the shelves. Some people do it well, but others do not. And that's just part of being that responsible consumer.
Yep. Just like there's a reason that, you can't buy and sell wild game. I mean, it just
right.
Making that natural resource a commodity, and rather it be for the self, the person, the family, it's to make $1. So I mean, that's just
right.
I'm very passionate about that. But on to the next thing.
And
go ahead.
Yeah, I will say one plug though, is that for folks who maybe don't have that knowledge, Vermont Fish and Wildlife does a lot of amazing free clinics, and there's a lot of people out there who are willing to share their knowledge. And I am putting in the comments right now a couple of upcoming free fishing clinics. So as we dive into the walleye recipe, feel free to check out the fishing clinics and see if something's around your area. And they're really good with helping you find the equipment that you need to.
Exactly. All right. So what I have here, I got Walleye Cheeks ranging in size. This was a good size walleye. These were smaller walleye. This is my favorite part of any fish, is the cheek. It is just tender, sweet, succulent. It's the best bite. I'll take that over a loin, a belly, a tail any day. And there's a shame there's only 2 of them, and they're so small on a fish. So, all right, I'm going to go over here. Hopefully that's kind of bright.
And for folks who are interested in walleye, and I know Jessee has the cheeks out and everything, but if you're interested in learning more about how to fish for them, there's lots of information from Vermont Fish and Wildlife. We're putting some info in the chat, and you can really find them around almost year round in many different bodies of water throughout Vermont. So that link that I just put, tons of information on it. And again, ask folks. There's people walleye fishing all of the time, and I can attest that it is super fun to pull in a walleye, especially if you haven't before, which I hadn't until last summer. It's just one of those fun fish to catch.
Yeah, honestly, I've never caught a walleye. I've always been, growing up and even today, brook trout and perch. But walleye is my favorite fish, so I just need to get into it.
All right, we got to take you out, Jessee.
Please do. All right, for anybody.
Oh, and we have Leanna saying you make some delicious halibut cheeks. So they're talking you up right now. So
that's my friend from Alaska. She's
love it.
She's from Barrow. She's great. So for anybody who was tuning in to my last show, they know my love for bear grease. So we're going to use that to fry the halibut. Or not the halibut. Look at my mind. The walleye cheeks. So I am going to just salt the cheeks, and I do have 2 bellies here as well. I like to only salt my proteins. I like to pepper after. I just find sometimes if the heat's not right or you let it go too long, the pepper can burn. So I just like to salt and then pepper after.
And have you done anything else to those cheeks or the belly or anything like that?
Nope, just keeping it simple. When I'm cooking at home for myself or family, I like to keep it simple and just let the flavors of the meat or vegetables really speak to themselves, and just highlighting them with some vinegar, some acid, oil, salt, pepper. So just real clean eating, no fuss, no frills. I'm not doing anything crazy, but it still will be delicious on the plate.
And I think that's one of the.
You get crazy though.
Sorry, I didn't catch what you said, Jessee.
Sometimes I do get crazy in the kitchen, though.
I mean, I've seen on your Instagram page, you smoked, what was the whole head of something?
Let's see. I smoked moose nose. I smoked a beaver ham.
It was the moose nose I was thinking of.
Yeah, that is the most delicious part of the moose for anybody who can get a moose this year. Please, please, please save the nose. Do not get a shoulder mount. Don't throw it in the trash. Save the nose. And if you don't want it, I'm in Burlington at Sweetwater's. Please drop it off. So we're just going to check and make sure our pan's getting hot. I want a good sear on the outside of these cheeks and bellies. With them varying in sizes, they're going to take different times to cook. The small ones are probably going to just be maybe 45 seconds. And our grease is starting to heat. So I'm going to add the bellies first because those are going to take the longest.
You can hear that sizzle.
Nice sizzle. And for anybody who has access to bear fat, saves it for themselves, it just makes everything taste so much better. My son says I'm the best popcorn maker because I fry my popcorn in bear fat and then mix maple sugar on it.
My mind's kind of blown right now of even thinking about having bear fat popcorn. And now that's entering high on my list of the next thing I need to be incorporating into my own kitchen.
I think we're getting together next weekend, right?
Yeah, that's the plan. So if you have some bear fat, I will gladly take some off your hands.
I think I'll give you some and then I'll make it for you too. I'll walk you through it.
Oh, wonderful. We'll be able to exchange something later in the summer once the mushrooms start popping up as well.
Yes.
So you have that over what, like a medium high heat?
Yeah, closer to medium.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, medium. Doesn't need to cook fast. The bear fat and that cast iron will get that nice heat to get that sear on it. So I don't want to burn it and crust out the outside.
Well, and as you said, one of the nice things I think too about really eating wild food and local food and really just knowing about your food is that simplicity when you're cooking with it and that taste that you get when you cook simply just is embedded with so much more flavor, right? It's embedded with the stories that go with it. It's embedded with the histories that go with it. And I'll speak for myself, but I think that's one of my favorite parts about wild food and, food that where, someone's growing it on their land is that it just tastes better. I don't mean that in a hyperbolic way either. It just has a better taste to it.
It does. It really does.
And for folks who, are looking to find local food near you, if you haven't signed up for a CSA or just don't know where to look, NOFA Vermont has a wonderful set of directories on their website. So I'm dropping that in the comments right now too. You can find farmers markets, some CSAs that are popping up, which are community supported agriculture. And I would highly suggest just hitting those up. It's demonstrably false too that when you're eating in season, it's not more expensive to be eating the vegetables. We're growing them right here. They don't have to travel. And like we were saying, they definitely taste wonderful. Look at those cheeks. It looks like a nice little happy smiley face. So Jesse, when it comes to, wild food in general, when you're out fishing or hunting or doing it, I guess, what would be your suggestions for folks who maybe don't traditionally see themselves in what has become the wild food scene, whether that's hunting or angling, about getting involved and, making sure that they feel safe and comfortable out there?
I mean, again, I would talk to people and just get their side of the story. Mine's a little different, being who I am. I treat animals a little different, and my relationship with them is a little different. But I still, and I'm also not a great hunter or angler. I'm much better with knives, and so what I do a lot of times is I help people in processing their animals, and that's how I get the bounty that I do. But I mean, when I say I'm not a great hunter, it's mostly time constraints and, working 60 to 65 hours at the restaurant. Those seasons are at busy times of the year. I can't always get away. So it's with myself, how do I work around that and be able to do those things that I enjoy and be able to feed myself and my family? So.
Yeah. And I think, I love the idea of helping people process and, contributing to that wild food gathering that way. And I know most folks are more than happy to share, especially if you're putting in some of that work, which can be arduous, when you get down to it.
Exactly. And I mean, too, being here in Vermont, being Abenaki, we have, our deer hunting rights and our fishing rights, but we don't have our moose hunting rights. That's, a lottery system. So the chances of drawing that tag are very, very slim. So I was lucky enough to meet my friend Jeff through Instagram last year, and he invited me out to his moose camp. He's Penobscot from Maine. And so I get to share in the experience that way, be able to help get my hands into breaking down the animal, eating it, and I'm going back next year. So, building those relationships, maybe things I can't have myself here.
Yeah. And for folks who have been doing this for a long time, there are a ton of people out there that are really interested in this. So putting yourself out there and opening yourself up is a great way to, make this whole scene a little bit more equitable than perhaps it is. And also, let's be honest, there are tons of people out there doing wild foods, and maybe we are, the dominant narrative around it just isn't showcasing them. So, that's part of what we want to be doing here too, is just making sure that we're lifting up all those voices that are out there doing this amazing work.
Yeah, I'm definitely not the first person to be doing what I'm doing, and definitely not the last. I mean, there are so many indigenous chefs that have been doing this for so long that I look up to and gain knowledge from and help and acceptance. And, I hope to do that for, my kids and younger native chefs and, just get people excited about this. All right, so these are all done. Kind of broke one a little bit, but when you're eating at home, doesn't matter as much. So we're going to start assembling a plate.
So you got your salad from before, which has been marinating for the past half an hour.
Yep. Yeah, and the longer you let it sit, I mean, not too long, just those flavors will combine and bind and just become delicious.
This whole meal just screams summertime to me. So fresh and vibrant and just delicious.
Oh, it's so good. Yeah, I mean, I would cook completely different if this was the middle of December.
In the middle of December, that's like when you just have like your hearty squash recipes that can just sit in your gut, and then you can just go to bed early when the sun's down.
Well, when did I do the last cooking show? What month was that? Sorry, they're all kind of blending together.
Yeah, 3 months ago. So what? That was March, I think.
Yeah. So yeah, that was
March.
Ossobuco time. Nice warm meal.
Yeah, exactly. I'm still thinking about the Ossobuco though. I would eat that during the middle of the summer without a doubt.
Yeah, let's be honest, I would too.
Just topping that with your salsa.
Yeah, right in the middle. That way I can still see the white of the fish.
See, these are the details that having a chef on really drives home for me, because by the time I'm usually done cooking, I'm just slopping stuff onto a plate, and I miss the whole aesthetic where you eat with your eyes first, because I'm usually so hungry. So this is wonderful and a good reminder.
Even if I'm going to eat box macaroni and cheese, I'm still going to plate it nice. Peanut butter and jelly.
All right. And what do you have there? Some more cilantro?
Cilantro, yeah. Just a little finish.
This looks so wonderful.
There you go.
Look at that finished product.
Oh, then it's slid.
Awesome.
So there you go.
Wow.
True Vermont cranberry beans, corn mafia hominy, wild rice, cucumber salad, bear fat seared halibut cheeks, ground cherry relish, salsa, whatever you want to call it.
Can't beat it. And all simply seasoned, not super done up, and the perfect summer meal without a doubt. And, Jessee, I'm dropping into the comments right now. You shared a list of a couple of amazing organizations to follow on Instagram and other social media platforms. And I would really highly recommend people check out the list that Jessee wanted us to share tonight, because they really start to get into a lot of that conversation around what an equitable food system looks like, and what centering indigenous food looks like in that as well. And if you're still learning, it's a great place to start. So thank you for providing that, Jessee. It's a wonderful addition as well.
You're welcome. And that goes from here in Vermont to Maine, throughout the West, down south, and all the way up to Alaska. So I just wanted to give a small part of, or rather a few food sites that I hold near and dear to my heart. And the more we do this, I'll share more. I said I don't want to inundate everybody all at once, but it's important to see, what other Native communities are doing with food. So what's that?
Yeah. And I will give, one last plug to also follow Jessee on Instagram. If you're looking to follow some Vermont specific stuff, he's great and put in a lot of great content out there. With that, folks, thank you for tuning in. This has been, the Vermont Wild Kitchen presents the Dawnland Kitchen, which is our quarterly series with Jessee. We're going to be bringing on some more indigenous chefs as well with Jessee here in the future. And as always, if you all are cooking up wild food, if you're pairing it with some Vermont fresh food, tag it on Instagram with the hashtag VT Wild Kitchen. Drop us a note on Vermont Fish and Wildlife's Facebook page, or, just join in this conversation the next time. We're going to be here on the third Thursday of next month, as we are for the next couple months. And, I'm also really excited to announce that starting next month, we're going to be partnering up with Rural Vermont to be presenting the Vermont Wild Kitchen as well. So it's going to be a wonderful partnership moving forward. And I can't wait to continue these conversations with people. And we're always open to ideas. So feel free to drop us a note whenever you are feeling up for it. And with that, I want to say thank you for tuning in. Jessee, do you have any last words?
If anybody has any suggestions on what they'd like to see in future episodes with us, I do want to focus on parts of the animals or fish that people don't think are edible. There's a fair amount of trappers out there, and beaver carcasses get thrown aside. I had the pleasure to work with beaver this year for the first time. It's should never be thrown away. So if people have ideas of things they want to see and to utilize animals to the fullest, I'm more than willing to hear them.
Yeah, awesome. Maybe we'll put out a survey or something here for viewers. And as always, share with your friends. We want to keep this conversation going with as many people as possible and build that bridge. So with that, I wish everybody a wonderful summer evening, and we will see you all in 1 month from now. So Jessee, thank you for joining us too. It's always a pleasure. All right. See ya, folks.